Hey,
And
where is it located? In
Delhi, New Delhi.
Sanipat? Where? Basant Bihar?
Vasant
Santipat?
Vihar, yes, Vasant Vihar.
Oh, Purbi Marg, Paschimi Marg? Yeah.
Yes, yes, yes. And
Okay,
also,
great.
I'm come from immigration. I'm working in immigration national
Oh,
in
wonderful.
Maputo.
Yeah, yeah.
Yes, that's why it's very good to be in this course for me.
Wonderful. Very
Yes,
nice.
yes,
Great. Welcome, welcome.
yes.
Sir, one thing we'll do, we'll have a get together soon. I told Domingos also, and some friends are coming. We'll have a short get together someday.
Yeah, sure.
Hmm.
Yeah, please do so. And I'll be very happy to attend and listen to all the interesting stories, and I can share some of my tales also. So
Okay.
I love
Yes,
Africa.
Saket Mall will be okay. We'll have lunch there and
Yeah, yeah. So
okay.
maybe you can arrange a particular date which is convenient to Dr. Sadanand. And
Hmm.
so, yeah, that will be a great idea. That will be wonderful. Very nice.
Okay. Okay. That I am thinking of maybe Saket Mall
Yeah,
some
sure, sure. Yeah, second week. Yeah, sure.
Domingo.
Yes, sir.
You'll have free time weekend or which day?
This weekend,
No, if we
Not
do.
now, once the course is over. Yeah.
Okay,
Maybe
no, no, no,
mid-February.
sir. We can have other official day will be problem for you.
I can say something in these days.
Okay,
Yes.
we'll see. Okay, so sir, we can start. Five students
So
are there.
how many people we have got now?
We
Three,
have
Domingo,
Prabina,
Hanma, and
Tanmay.
Prabina.
Tanmaya is very active, participating in discussion. Domingo. So with this 3 to 4 student, we can start.
Okay, great.
I also request, Domingo, Tanmaya, Pravina, whoever, kindly participate at least 50% of the classes. I know you have your commitment, but at least 50% classes you participate so that, the discussion will be enriching for you. You need not to study course material. If you have a good analytical skill, you can
Yes.
write exam by
Yeah.
just, attending classes. And we are not, particularly this kind of courses program. We don't focus on memorizing public report.
Exactly. Exactly.
It is a very contemporary applied area. So you discuss here and same thing you write in your exam.
Yes,
Yes,
sir.
sir. Over to you.
Okay. Thank you very much, Dr. Sadanand. Thank you so much. Okay. So this course, as I started last Sunday, is MPAC 5. This is a Master of Arts course in Migration and Diaspora Studies under Mamidi. The title of this course is State and Society in Africa. In the last class, last Sunday on 5th January, we covered top three units, basically providing a broad overview of Africa, introducing Africa, the colonial legacies that they went through, and nationalism and the legacy. So what kind of legacy? Good legacy, bad legacy, ugly legacy, all kinds of legacies we discuss. So we try to provide a big drop of African studies, taking a more composite view, taking a more cumulative views. In today's class, we'll take care of unit 4, 5, 6, 7, again in a very broad spectrum. We'll start with problems of statehood, integration and legitimization. Then we'll move on to issues of development, types of regimes, then administration, military and political parties. As Dr. Sadanand said just a few minutes ago, one of the main purpose and objective of this particular course is we are not simply just talk and listen. It will be more like interactive kind of thing, so that at least when you get a sense of what Africa looks like, what the issues are, and trying to contemporize it. Okay? So I think that way we can have a very intensive and also in-depth understanding what Africa went through in the last 200 years during the colonial times and during the post-colonial phase, in the early stage of the post-colonial phase, and in the more contemporary phase. So we'll try to connect the past, the present, and maybe possible to connect also the future. So trying to make a bridge, like a blend between the past, very past, then immediate past, then present, and maybe the future. And in the future, when I say the immediate short term, in the intermediate term, 5 to 10 years, and in the long term, like 10 or 15 years and beyond, what Africa is going to be. And some of the predictions may come right, some of the predictions may go awfully wrong, okay? But at least we'll try to make a sense of it. In the last class, we talked about how the globalization has brought about a different paradigm shift in Africa, interconnectedness, the global emergence of global South. I discussed about how in the last G20 summit in Delhi, for the first time, African Union earned its own place in the group of nations, in the committee of nations, in the big table, in the high tables. And the global South is now a power to reckon with, okay, in a particularly, as Acharya Amitabh Acharya says, in a multiplex world. And how Africa is also playing its own role in a very positive way, I would say, in the emerging world order. So far from the days of Africa when it was being portrayed as a dark continent, now we see Africa a continent that is very proud of itself, proud of its heritage, proud of its culture, proud of its socio-political institutions. Of course, there are problems. There are problems everywhere. Even in the so-called developed countries, in the affluent countries, there are significant problems. Maybe there are more problems. So Africa has its own share of problems. But having said that, in spite of all the obstacles, hindrances, setbacks, bottlenecks, I think they have still come a long way forward. We are all aware of the slave trade of the 15th century, how that played out in different parts of Africa, in America, then eventually the end of slavery, scramble for Africa, the different fragmentation and decimation of the African society, the scramble among all the competing colonial powers, Britain, Germany, France, Portuguese, etc., Belgium, the colonial onslaught, how it destroyed the rich physical resources, destroying societal, cultural fabric of the African people, then how the European ideas, when it was transplanted, in certain ways it was a very positive one, but in certain ways also it was a negative one because it choked and it also trampled upon the growth of indigenous kind of knowledge, etc., etc. The problem of Africa and the deficit of ideas and institutions, how Africa was manipulated and also exploited for its mineral resources, how the processed goods were taken to Europe and again recycled back to Africa and being sold at a double or triple the prices. Okay. Then how Africa became a trap, became a victim of acute food insecurity, severe famine, heavy dependence of food aid, intra and inter-state wars, environmental deterioration, wasteful use of natural and human resources, lack of sustainable development, inadequate health and education facilities, weak link between post-colonial state and society, contested borders. I think there are multiple issues that I think are something that we need to emphasize upon and we also need to discuss upon. Excuse me just for a minute. Excuse me. So these are the things we discussed. So these are the things we discussed in the last class. In today's class, let me just give you some highlights, the bullet points, and then again we'll discuss each one of them. I think if you look at chapter 4, for example, the problems of statehood, integration, and legitimation, I've just prepared a small bullet points of like 11 or 12 points. I think each one of them are very significant and there can be some duplication, some overlapping of the things that we discussed last time. For example, we see differences in ideologies, okay? All kinds of ideologies, the capitalist ideologies, socialist ideas, Marxist ideas, how the different parts of Africa, East, West, North, South, Central, how they have got split in different ideologies. Each ideology has its upside, has its own downside, has its pros and cons, upside and downsides. And different countries in Africa, during the colonial days and also after the, particularly after the post-colonial phase, they embraced that. Some of them had good experience, some of them did not have that much good experiences for a variety of reasons. The style of leadership, that was also very, very important. Some people were very autocratic by nature, very democratic, at least trying to be democratic or semi-democratic. For example, some people maybe you can say tyrannical leadership. I think that also affected the overall economic development also, because it is like a top-down approach, not like a bottom-up. Because the leadership, they basically lay out the broad spectrum, they lay out the broad vision of a particular country in a particular ways, okay, and that also percolates down to the bottom. So style of leadership is very, very crucial, and it is not uniform. It is very heterogeneous in different part of Africa that we have seen. The socialist capitalist divide, socialist particularly in a particular order, trying to maintain uniformity across the board, okay, but that also stifled competition, okay. So just like the old, I can make some rough parallel with the things that happened during the Cold War in Soviet Union, erstwhile Soviet Union. So in a way, everybody was treated equal, everybody had to get a certain minimum level of income, etc., etc. But that also prevented somebody getting rich in a legal way or legitimate ways, or somebody going up. So the societal development was kind of uneven. In a capitalist world, on the other side, of course, it is full of competition, and in a competition, somebody goes up, somebody goes down. And then initial stages in capitalist order, or the places where they did experiment capitalism, some of the countries, they went up, but then after a while, the gap became wider and wider, and it was very difficult to bridge the gap between the rich and the poor, rich country and poor country, rich elite and poor elites, poor people. So that is the downside of the capitalism. Some people, they accumulate more. Like a lot of times we say in India and many countries in the world, in third world, that 10% people, they own 90% of the properties. Okay. So I think that's not fair. That's not equitable. Okay. So we need a more equitable, more balanced kind of society in a much more syncretic way. So that did not happen that way. The patron-client relationship that we also saw in terms of the leadership, or in terms of the rich elites trying to dominate, trying to control, trying to manipulate the systems, and the client, they certain areas, they try to remain on the periphery, etc. The bureaucratic centralism, that was also another things we saw in the nature of the state in some of the societies, both during pre-colonial and also in the post-colonial. The bureaucracy, they played a very, very important role in many ways. They tried to help in the administration, trying to bring about an aura of governance. I would say good governance, maybe that was their intention. But I think too much centralization by the bureaucrats, that also created a lot of problem in the middle or in the lower rung. Okay, so this excessive bureaucratic centralism, it excluded the people at the local grassroots levels. The lack of viable civil society, I think that was again another issues that the African states had to deal with, because during the colonial period, there was basically no civil society in many parts of Africa. But in the post-colonial phase, in certain places, they did try to encourage the emergence of civil society, because in a civil society, at least plays a very important role in the context of putting some checks, because we, in a democracy, we need accountability, we need transparency, and we need certain level of checks and balances. And I think civil society, to a great extent, they do provide that reasonable checks, okay, so that the executive, the legislature, the judicial branches, and other branches and the organs, they do not go off board. Okay, so that is very, very important. The seventh point I would like to make is the monopoly state or a hegemonic state in the pre and post-colonial things. Hegemony can go, even if you look at some of the positive aspect of hegemonic state, okay, or monopoly state, okay, to an extent, maybe you can tolerate, maybe you can find certain positive things if there is one. But I think beyond that, again, it is more counterproductive kind of thing. So it doesn't help really, because the internal mechanisms, the internal structures, that is not strongly embedded. Okay, so I think that is one of the problems with the hegemonic state. Okay, particularly when you try to have a long-term sustainable kind of democratic features. Also, I think in Africa, as in many other continents, in many other plural societies. It's very heterogeneous. There is ethnic stripes along racial lines, cultural lines, religious lines, lot of regional variations. Some areas are highly developed, some areas are in between, some areas are completely underdeveloped kind of things. Religion things, Christianity was very dominant in certain parts. Islam came to Ethiopia, Kenya, Uganda, many other places. They also played their roles. And in the process, they left a lot of footprints. Also, I think the cultural variations was many. And don't forget the role of the tribals, the tribes in different African societies. They also played along with their own customs, own rituals, etc., etc. The racial, just like, for example, I can give you, again, as I told you last Sunday, the example of the movie Gandhi, directed by Sir Richard Attenborough, that was released in 1982. And you saw in that, I mean, that's a fact, the discrimination between the white people, the different discrimination, the segmentation or segregation, the whites, the blacks, the colored people, okay? And how the black people and the colored people for a long period during the policy of apartheid, racial segregations, they were put on the periphery, okay? And only in the mid-80s, okay, thanks to people like Nelson Mandela and other people, okay, the African National Congress and number of movements, okay, ultimately the policy of apartheid was knocked down, and then it became a multiracial country, South Africa, for example. I think I told you the examples of South African cricket team that was banned in our country, in India, for a long, long time, because we cannot, under the Indian government policies, since independence till today, India cannot tolerate a country which is insisting on only sending person from one particular race, namely the white race. But once they ended the policy of apartheid, the policy of racial segregation, the South African cricket team was welcome to play in India, and they have visited India, and Indian cricket team has also visited South Africa. South Africa is also, as I said last time, as a member of the big prestigious elite group of BRICS. Originally, BRICS was Brazil, Russia, India, and China. Then later on, I think 2006, South Africa was also a member. Now, of course, there are a lot more members in the BRICS umbrella outfit. So in the ethnic terms, there are many, many examples of racial, cultural, religious, regional variation. The next point I would try to raise is the question of assimilation and non-assimilation. I think this is very important, particularly from a sociological perspectives. I have done some study about diasporic experience in Canada, in US, and I think to some extent that can also apply in the Indian context. In African context. Assimilation means what? Like you come from different parts of the society to a particular host country, okay? And you bring certain kind of, for example, in America, okay? People going from India, from China, from Vietnam, from Laos, from Guyana, from European countries, from Latin America, from Mexico, Haiti, Colombia, you name it, okay? So one theory is assimilation. You assimilate with the mainstream cultures, okay? In this context of Africa, for example, in South Africa, people from India, people from colored people, okay? You assimilate your culture with the white dominant, quote unquote, the dominant culture. So there are people, they call it like a melting pot theory, that Nathan Glaser, Daniel Patrick Moynihan, a number of other scholars, they have talked about it. On the other hand, some people say society cannot be assimilated artificially. So this is something called non-assimilationist. Okay, some people call it the salad bowl theory. In spite of the fact that people have been there for 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years, first generation, second generation, third generation, still they maintain their own cultural identities, sub-identities, their ethnic primordialities, and also the distinctive and unique feature of their cultural norms and ideas. That never goes away. And it is more like a salad bowl kind of things. Like in a salad bowl, in a thali, you get cucumber, you get carrots, you get tomatoes, you get, all the salad items, okay? Each one of them, they enrich the plate, okay? So like in a societal kind of thing, if I can use that metaphor. So cultural pluralism People like, for example, you go to New York, you go to Chicago, you go to Toronto, you go to Vancouver, you see Little India section in the society, in the city, little Greeks, little China, little Italy. Everybody brings something distinctive, something unique to the entire urban landscape or in the sociological context kind of thing. So that is non-assimilationary thing. That is more like a composite kind of thing. So there are people, scholars on both sides of the aisle. One, they strongly believe in assimilation. Once you go to a particular country, you go to South Africa, okay, you try to merge your identities, okay, be, talk like a South African, like a white, behave like one, okay. And some of the other theories, they think, even if you spend there 50, 60, 100 years, 2 generations, 3 generations, still maintain your ethnic identities, your religious identities, your racial identities, feel proud of it, feel proud of your heritage kind of thing. Of course, that does not prevent you or preclude you from participating actively in the mainstream societal things, okay, or mainstream political process, okay. So just because you are a black or you are a Negro or you are a Indian person, okay, you have every right to participate in the local politics of it or in the mainstream societies or in the business of it or whatever it is, okay. So I think again Africa was caught in the middle between these two competing paradigm, two competing um, uh, sociological seismic shift. Okay. The next question is the mismatch between the core and periphery. Okay. So for example, the center, they try to be very dominant, okay, for a particular stage, 30, 40, 50, 60 years. And the periphery in the provinces or in the sub-localities at the lower end, okay, they were treated just like periphery. But what happened is, because of the uneven nature of development and also because patronage was offered in a particular area, other areas for different reasons, political, economic, it was precluded. What happened was, after a particular time, 20, 30, 40 years, the core became periphery and periphery became the core. The point I'm trying to say is the so-called dominance or the hegemonic nature of those elites or those particular group, that eroded over a period of time. And the people who were like on the margin, it became more powerful. So that created a lot of envy hypothesis, jealousy kind of things. That also created a lot of social turbulence, economic turbulence, okay? And that was not very helpful. That was not very conducive to create a more egalitarian African societies per se, okay? So this mismatch between core and the periphery, okay? And so what happened was, in some ways, the underdogs became the top dogs and the top dogs became the underdogs. So that created a lot of social imbalance kind of things. The next point was, of course, the weak civil society, which I just alluded to. Even if there was at least some semblance of civil society, that was not very strong and it was very weak and it was not given proper channelized ways of developing it. And the final point I would like to make is in the nature of state is this endemic poverty and the resulting corruptions, okay? Because a variety of natures, I don't like to blame any particular group or segment or sections about it, but the fact of the matter is the poverty was very endemic, okay? A lot of things over which you have no control. For example, the natural calamities, flood, famine, drought, okay, disease, lot, even pandemics. I was reading the other day an article, even things worse than pandemics used to take place in those days. Of course, people didn't know about it. They felt, but maybe this is a divine curse or something, and they used to take it in stride. So lots of people died in many different parts of Africa, okay? So the endemic poverty and the resulting corruption also. So whatever the economic aid came, at least in the post-colonial phase, from different countries, from UNDP and many other things, okay? So the people who are in charge, okay, people who are at the ruling elites, etc., they tried to pocket that one. So it did not go to the people who really needed the most. So endemic poverty and resulting corruption, that worked in tango. So I think these are the things I think that we need to know, particularly when think about the nature of state. I mean, why, even if a structure or semblance of state was being created, it was not a very ideal one. And there was a lot of flaws in that one, and a lot of things was beyond, of course, the um, beyond the capacity of the state, but a lot of things were also self-engineered to a self-inflicted kind of thing. So that could have been best avoided. So that is, I think, the main aspects of Unit 4. In Unit 5, issues of development, I've again prepared, like, again, small bullet points, okay? Number one, which I discussed last Sunday, the long phase of colonization, okay? Then again, this long phase of colonization, certain areas were preferred, certain areas was not preferred. Maybe due to political things, maybe due to partialities, okay? So that again, the development was very lopsided, and that also affected the growth of African continent as a whole, in terms of economic prosperity and development kind of things. Number two, plundering. One of the main complaint against the colonial masters was, whether it is British or French or Belgians or Portuguese or whoever, I think the whole idea was to just rip off, okay, just use it like a means for their own personal good. That happened in India also, that happened in many parts of the world, okay. Even when the Britishers, they went to US and Canada, and I have read a lot of books about it, how they tried to exploit, okay, only in the semblance of some governance was there, but I think the whole idea was to take advantage of the resources, take advantage of the manpower, etc. And that also was one of the reasons why the development did not take place adequately. The next one is economic stagnation, which I just discussed. Okay, economic stagnation, it followed because of the long phase of colonialization, plundering, economic stagnation. The economy was got stymied, and natural disasters like drought, famine, flood, etc., the diseases, uh, and in contemporary times, the AIDS crisis. Uh, the next point is the heavy and mounting debt burden. I think in the post-colonial phase, a lot of the African countries, they're desperate for economic aid. They did get aid from World Bank, from IMF, from many other resources. Okay, uh, I was just reading, by 2008, for example, about $300 billion debt burden was there. And in recent times, I'm sure you must have read that China, although it is being very generous in giving economic aid to different African countries under Belt and Road initiatives, under Africa initiatives, etc., in a way, it is like a debt trap, okay? You get it for a long-term lease kind of things, okay? Maybe you pay little, but you are bonded kind of things to. So it is basically economic aid with strings attached to it, and very tight strings attached to it. And not many people feel comfortable, but that they have basically no choice, okay? So this debt burden, it's like a permanently you are in that particular trap, and a lot of the countries, they could not figure out how to get out of this particular debt trap, okay? They needed the money, they needed the capital, they needed the technical know-how, etc., okay? But they're unable to pay back, okay? Inequality of incomes in different levels. For example, certain states, particularly the eastern part of Africa, they are comparatively better off because of the adequate access to the water resources, and some of the more important minerals used to be there. South Africa, of course, is a very rich country. But if you go to West Africa and many places, other parts of Africa, I will give you one example. I was in Egypt for a couple of days, few years ago, on official mission. I went to Cairo, I went to Alexandria, but I also went to some countryside, some rural parts. I was totally shocked. Even in Cairo also, I mean, some part, the place where I was staying, that was like in a kind of upscale Cairo, I would say. I stayed in our delegation stayed in a big hotels. But you just go a couple of miles near the pyramid, near the Sphinx, or some other places. I mean, people were basically asking for some money. If some people asking me for a piece of bread, they have not taken any food for a days altogether. And we went to a little bit inside to the hinterland, and I was totally shocked. I mean, uh, So I'm just giving you one example, okay? And I've heard from my friends who have been to different places in Congo, in Nigeria, and a couple of places, even in Sudan also. So there is like big mismatch in certain places and certain other places. So in terms of inequality of incomes, declining standards of living that also led because of the inequality of incomes, and also process of globalization. In many ways, globalization brought a lot of tangible benefits to many African people, but at the same time, it choked their indigenous industries, etc., etc. So it was, for many African countries, it was more like a one-way street. It was not like a reciprocal, like a two-way kind of things. Okay, a bad governance, the governance architecture in most part of Africa, it did not develop fully, and because of the bad governance, that also, and when you add bureaucratic centralism, when you add um corruption, etc., at the top, okay, I think that all led to a failure of governance. uh, Lack of sustainable development. Even if development was there at certain levels, it was not sustainable. It was not like a uh, long term approach. So it was more like a band-aid kind of approach, more like a short term approach. So that did not help them. Because you need, for example, like look at our own country, India. For a long time, for at least past 15, 20 years of independence, we are not agriculturally independent. So we had a lot of course, we had got food shortages, we had got famines, etc., etc. But after a while, particularly in the 70s onwards, because of the agricultural revolution, the successful green revolution, then that was capped by the blue revolution, taking advantage of the marine resources, taking advantage of the white revolution, mostly the dairy products, milk products, etc. Then India by 1980s and 90s and onwards, it more became like the hub of green revolution, white revolution, and blue revolution. I think that did not happen in Africa to that extent, okay? And even today also, there is still a lack of sustainable development. If you need to move up in the scale, in the ladder, the development has to be visible, has to be tangible, and has to be sustainable. It is not like one step forward and two steps back. It has to be rather three steps forward, and maybe you can afford some shortcomings or some lacunas or some deficiencies one step, but it cannot be one step forward and three steps back. I think that is what happened in many parts of Africa. So that's why we saw uh, even today, as we speak, and this is already one quarter of the century of 21st century is already over. I mean, of course, Africa has come quite significantly in terms of human index, etc., etc. But still, they should have been much, much more higher, which for a variety of reasons, as I just outlined, they have not been there. And also a huge mismatch between import and export. Okay, so a lot of times, as I said, the colonial masters, the Europeans, they took away all the rich mineral resources, they processed it, and again sent it back to Africa. Okay, so that means you are in a double trap. Okay, so you take it cheap, then again you are selling it at a double the premium. So that definitely did not help. So these are the issues. I'm not blaming only the colonial people. I think a lot of to do with the way the different ruling elites in different parts of Africa they dealt with. Certain things were, of course, extraneous. We have to give uh, some some imponderables, some of the intra-design wares, the tribal warfare, the nature of governments. I think those are also responsible. But overall, it did have a very negative impact on the way Africa uh, could have been, at least, okay, and it could have been much, much more significantly higher. The next point is the type of regimes. In Africa, you have got basically, I think there are four types of regimes that you see: unitary regimes, military regimes, authoritarian regimes, and pluralist regimes. Okay, uh, unitary regimes. Okay, during the colonial period, certain it's basically dealing with one-party systems, okay? And in the post-colonial phase, I mean, why some people felt, I mean, some people would argue that, I mean, why certain African countries they chose or they preferred unitary systems? And partly because some people felt this is a tradition, because multi-party is not a tradition of colonial states. So maybe we'll be better off with a one-party governments, okay? And just go with the flow kind of thing. But that also created problems. It prevented the growth of an alternative viewpoints and alternative parties. Direct democracy, some countries felt that it is not ideal because this particular party has led us to independence. So let us put all faith in this particular party. So they will do right. They will take us in the development path. Okay. And they will do the needful. They will take care of all the people. Okay. So tradition is one aspect. Direct democracy is another one. National unity. So there is another argument why some countries chose unitary path is because they felt that the one party system, it can bring about a unity. Okay. It can make the society much more homogeneous. Okay. Much more monolithic. And also some countries felt that unitary system can also develop, can provide the kind of development that those countries need. Okay. Because if it is fragmented, maybe development will be dispersed kind of thing. So for four regions: tradition, direct democracy, national unity, development orientation. Certain countries, they prefer unitary regimes. Unitary means one political party, a single party. In the 70s, so that was there in the early part of 20th century. In the 70s and 80s, we see certain countries in Africa, they preferred military regimes because they felt we need a big sticks because we need more discipline. Maybe certain they can control and combat or contain the endemic corruptions or poverty. They can take decisions. Okay, so things well, and also you can say ambitions. Like so, the other day, I think a few weeks ago in Malta, even in Sudan for a long time, there was these military governments because the different parties they started fighting the different elements. So the military wanted to bring order, bring this. But what happens is down the road, even this military they also become corrupt. Like as it is often said, power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely. That can happen in a unitary system. That can also happen in a military systems. The third kind of regimes is authoritarian regimes. And this is not necessarily a military regimes. Okay. Authoritarian means what? All powers are vested in one authority. Okay. So, for example, in some ways you can say the Mao Zedong period, or you can say Marcos period in Spain, or you can say Marcos period in Philippines, or Franco period in Spain, Stalin phase in then Soviet Union. So I can give you many examples in many different Noriega in Panama. So authoritarian means one particular group, okay, or even you can say the Assad government in Syria or Gaddafi in Libya, okay. One particular person or a group of clique of persons, 3, 4, 5 people, okay, they try to control the levers of power, exercise power, okay, and they hold on to it, okay, with their own clique or with their own group, okay. So this authoritarian governments, okay. And finally, I think in the post 1990s onwards, mostly in the post Cold War, after 1990, we see an emergence of a pluralist regime in some parts of Africa. Okay, and this happened because of two things: a, the internal domestic developments. Okay, demand for more human rights, more participation, emergence of civil society of some sorts. Okay, but it also happened this longing for pluralist regimes, for democracy in Eastern Europe, democracy in Southeast Asia, world over, the end of the Cold War. If Czechoslovakia can do it, Poland can do it, Romania can do it, Russia Mikhail Gorbachev can ask for perestroika and glasnost, open society and economic restructuring. Why can't we do that? So there was a clamor for pluralist regimes, I think, for a variety of domestic regions, and also because of the new knowledge that came forward, and a lot of the African students and scholars who went to the West, to the America, to Great Britain, to Canada, to many other places. When they came back, okay, they came with new ideas, new Renaissance kind of things. Okay, I mean, in a way, it reflects like I remember again. I'm going back to the movie Gandhi. When Gandhi came back to India, he was a different man. He was a different person because he saw firsthand what is happening to Indian laborers in South Africa. Okay, they are not being paid their wages adequately. They are being tortured. They are being discriminated. They are being segregated. Okay, so when he came to India, he started this movement of non-cooperation, Swaraj, all those kind of things. So this pluralist regime, so again, the unitary regimes, one party, political party, military regimes, the military taking the military junta, and that's why you see coup, counter coup. Again, there is a competition among the military masters, okay? One upmanship, authoritarian regimes, okay, trying to control the levers of power as long as it is they can, okay? And the pluralist regime. I think each one of them has its own downside, has its own flaws, etc., etc. Even in the pluralist systems, again, over a period of time, they also become corrupt. Okay, so like a lot of places we see in the world. Okay, so it's basically it's very different to find out who is more. I mean, who is a crook or who is a worse crook. So basically, it's a competition between two thieves. Okay, he's a bigger thief or a small thief, but nevertheless, they are thieves or crooks. Okay, so each of them, the unitary systems, military regimes, authoritarian, pluralist, had its upside, also had its downside. In terms of maybe decision making, quick decision makings, okay, in terms of putting things in a fast track, maybe in some ways, unitary system or military or authoritarian, they did. But in terms of having a more democratic structure, more consultative structure, more balanced structure, more equitable structure, maybe the pluralist things. But the thing is, because of the lot of external factors, external influences, and particularly corruption at the high places, a lot of things are also undermined in due course of time. And Unit 7, administration, military, and political parties, and how we see a dichotomy between centralized systems and also decentralized. Basically, British colonies, the colonies that was controlled by Britain, they preferred a much more decentralized kind of things. Like you can take the example of India. When India was under the British Raj or British colonial power, for example, they tried to have a small group of people, okay, sitting in Kolkata or sitting in Delhi later on, when Delhi was transferred to the capital. But basically, it was run by the middlemen, by the Rajas, Maharajas, by the Zamindars, and a group of people, the civil servants, okay? And then they used to do the dirty work, okay, collecting taxes, etc., running the day-to-day business, okay? So that was the British approach. Basically, it was much more a decentralized kind of things. It is more like a top-down approach, I would say. On the other hand, the French, uh, uh, wherever they had got colonies in Africa, they wanted a more centralized approach. They wanted to control the levers. They wanted the remote control to be in their hands. Okay, so maybe they did not trust the local masters or the local elites. Okay, so they tried to do that. So each of them has its own advantage and disadvantage. So this is the way they run, particularly the two big colonial masters, Great Britain and France. And the Great Britain model was Anglophone and the French model was Francophone. The other one was unitary and plural. Again, it goes back to the regimes that I talked about. Unitary means single things, plural means multi. Okay, plural. Okay, so plural means it's more like a decentralization kind of thing. Like for example, in India, okay, the Panchayati Raj, the Gram Panchayat, the 74th Amendment to the Constitution, similar ways. Okay, you can say that. Okay, unitary means single. Everything is decided in the top and it goes straight from there. The military in politics, okay? In certain countries, the military got embedded along with the governance structures, okay? Like Ayub Khan in Pakistan, Yahya Khan in Pakistan, Irsad government in Bangladesh, and many other countries in the world. I'm just picking up some countries here and there, okay? So the military, certain times, so this relationship between the civil military relation, it become very tenuous, okay? Like for example, in India, it's totally bifurcated. This is civilian governments, this is military governments, okay? So the interface is much more in a predictable ways, okay? But in certain countries, okay, like one of the reasons or we always say about Pakistan, I mean, why Pakistan is a classic case of a failed state? Because for a long time, since independence, for the most part, except Nawaz Sharif, Benazir Bhutto here and there, or Imran Khan, mostly it is run by the military, whether it is Ayub or Yahya or Parvez Musharraf, Iskandar Mirza. I mean, it is mostly the military, they took that. And even when the civilian governments were in power, still the military used to control the levers of power. They used to have the remote control. That's why you saw the military coming back every now and then in many countries in the world. Okay. The political parties, one party, two party, multi-party systems, the pros and cons. Some countries, they experimented with one party. It worked in taking quick decisions, fast decisions, but at the same time, there are some problems and issues. The two-party systems, like in many countries in the world, like for example, you can say Great Britain or even in America. Of course, in America, there are many multiple parties, but the two main parties are, of course, the Democratic Party and the Republican Party. In Great Britain, Labour Party and the Conservative parties in many countries in the world. Okay, but in certain countries there are multiple parties, but there are one party which is very powerful, and they have been in power for a long time. Like for example, Japan. I have been there for many years. Liberal Democratic Party (LDP). They have been in power for the most part. Okay, 50, 60, 70 years. Okay. So there are other political parties, New Kome Party, Democratic Party of Japan, but I think it's the LDP, Liberal Democratic Party, that is in power. In Singapore, the People's Party, they're in power. Okay, other parties, they are very peripheral kind of things. Okay, so one party, two party, multi-party. Of course, you can argue that we need like India, we have a multi-party systems. I mean, basically, we have got two national parties, the Congress Party and the BJP. Congress used to have a one-party dominance from 47 to what you can say till 77, then again 80 to 89, 96 or whatever. Then Devgowda, Gujarat, then of course coalition governments, and again in the last 10, 15 years, it is the BJP which is at the upper hand. So mostly two national parties, but we also have a lot of state level parties. Samajwadi Party, BJP, Bahujan Samaj Party, Trinamool Congress, DMK, Anna DMK. I mean, many political parties in different things. In Africa also, in certain places, they try with a multi-party system. Some people try to experiment with the two-party system, trying to duplicate or replicate the British model or the American model. Some people say, no, we let us stick with the one-party things. And I think each of them has its own upside and downside. The theory of contagion, this is a domino effect, okay? So for example, contagion means like, let us say you are driving your car in Noida or Gurgaon, okay, in a foggy situation. Unfortunately, let us say somebody's car hitting somebody's car, okay. In the fogginess or in the darkness, a lot of times the other cars, they hit into it, okay. So it's like one particular government falls and a military coup takes place. There is an adjoining country or a neighboring country where the governance system is relatively fragile or weak. They also fall into the same trap. So it's like a domino effect. This domino word was very popularized in the 60s and 70s, particularly in Indochina, Cambodia, Laos, etc. The fear was, particularly according to American policymakers, was if one particular country in Indochina or Southeast Asia falls to communism, there is a temptation of other nearby poor countries to also fall into the same trap. They also become communist. So it is very important. We need to prevent that country to becoming a communist entity or a communist regimes. Okay. So we need to fortify that. We need to contain communism. And that's how this idea of containment of communism came into place in the 60s, 70s, and 80s during the Cold War regimes. So here the contagion thing is, unless the governance structure is fortified or is strong or is viable, it is very possible, it is very likely that the nearby countries, they can also fall into the same trap. They can also fall into the domino effect, okay? And becoming also going through a very unstable regimes, unstable governance, and also kind of a military system or authoritarian things. Some people say, well, the theory of conspiracy that uh, maybe some Western powers, maybe the CIA, some intelligence agency of USA or KGB of Russia or the Chinese or somebody else, okay, they're trying to create some kind of uh, disturbance, some kind of instability kind of things. Maybe they have some vested interest. And maybe it is a newer version, I would say, a scramble for Africa among the new players, not necessarily colonial powers. Like China has its own interest. They would like to stake out in Africa. They like to expand the spheres of influence in Africa. Maybe Japan, maybe India, maybe, I mean, you can say maybe it is in much more benign way, okay? Because we like to see that. But again, some people say there is a conspiracy. I mean, because nobody gives free lunches. That everything comes with a price. You have to pay for free lunch, like any lunch, okay? So some people argue that. So people refuse to believe that this is just done as a matter of charity or as a matter of helping out people, like in a much more liberal kind of thinking kind of things, okay? So I think the variety of ways we see centralized, decentralized, military, political parties, and different kinds of things, okay? So I think, again, each of these ideas that I just mentioned, administration, military, political parties, conceptually, I think there is nothing wrong with it. It is good, at least some elements are there, okay? Some rudiments of a, I mean, a rough or a rough template of governance is there, at least they are trying to map. But the thing is, if it is standing on a weak structure, if it is strangling on a fledgling structure, that cannot sustain long. Again, the point I was trying to make is, whether you make governance, whether you make a party system, whether you want to make democracy strong, whether you want to make grassroots democracy, whether you like to bring a good administration, good governance, okay, it needs to be long term, it needs to be sustainable, it needs to be affordable. You cannot just dream big in a sitting on a top of an ivory tower. You need to plan out things, okay? And unless you do that in a more proportionate way, in a much more doable way, fiscally speaking, in terms of the manpower that you have, in terms of the aid that you are getting from different countries, and how that is being channelized, it's very difficult to sustain that. Maybe you can have a governance for a few years. That's why you saw in many countries. And again, this ambitions, like for example, Sudan. I mean, I have studied that one for some time. I mean, it's a beautiful country, but I'm not trying to take sides between North Sudan, South Sudan kind of things. But again, that country got split, okay? And again, at the end of the day, both the sides, they suffer. It's not like one person gained at the cost of the other one, okay? And of course, there are people from the third countries, whether it is developing countries, some rich countries, they try to take advantage of that one. Okay? But the thing is, it is the people of Africa, the people, the native people in that particular country and that region, they need to think about it as to what is the best form. They need to have a more collective approach. They need to take all the stakeholders, the academics, the intellectuals, the writers, the professionals, different people of different ideologies, different political parties, or with people with different political orientations. Let everybody sit down, let everybody share their views. What is their vision of this country A or country B, C, okay? And how best we can do that, okay? In a much, because this is today somebody is ruling, maybe somebody else will rule next day, okay? But we should have a semblance. For example, like in India, we are not saying this is the best, everything is hunky-dory, everything is fine, okay? We do have problems, but at least we have a system, okay? It is not a perfect system. There are a lot of flaws. I admit that. But still, having said that, we have a process. Judicial review, for example. Okay, a lot of people criticize the judiciary is a committed judiciary, it is a bought judiciary, purchased judiciary. Okay, but still, I think certain places we do get justice from the judiciary. Okay, so I think you need to have a long-term view. Of course, there is always the need for transparency, accountability, checks and balance. Okay, and everything needs perfection. Everything needs improvisation. But you need to start somewhere. Okay, so it is incumbent upon the persons from Africa. I think I've attended some seminars and things like that. I think people understand that. The good thing is there is now a new leadership emerging in different parts of Africa, new elites coming along, highly educated people. They understand. They like to give back. Okay, something back to the societies. Okay. And I think if they do that, I think definitely Africa will go much more faster in a very positive way and a much more progressive way. I think that's the way I would look at it. Okay. And I think let me conclude. This is 1 hour. Okay. Any comments, any questions on anything? Anything would like to add? Okay. I would be more than happy to listen to you. Karan, Domingo, Tanmaya. Domingo, tell us anything unique and distinctive about your country, Mozambique, that you think is very much similar to the things that I just said?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Can you tell us something interesting about, I mean, something that you think is very similar to what I said about your country?
Yeah, when you was talking about the economy stagnation, uh, it's come in my mind about the company of Elon Musk.
Okay.
Yes, that company, they are building cars. Uh, it's
Tesla.
electronic cars. Yeah, Tesla. So that material of the batteries is coming from Mozambique.
Mm. But you know
That
what, Domingo? I think let me just tell you. I mean, I don't know Elon Musk. Okay, of course, I use Twitter, I use X. Okay, but you know, he is like an entrepreneur. Okay, SpaceX, Teslas. Okay, all the kind of things. I mean, he's basically a is like a typical. I mean, like Donald Trump. Okay, he believes in transactional diplomacy. Okay, in transactions. So again, as I said, in America for a long time, the like they say, the only business of Great Britain was business. And you can say that about America and many other countries. The only business of Elon Musk is business. Okay. And the other day, somebody was telling me, I mean, how Trump is going to do about the tariff, high tariff on China. But somebody said that, look, if Elon Musk can sell many more cars, Teslas in China, okay, or he can have a more lucrative deals, okay. So maybe he can cut a deal with Jinping, okay, in China. Maybe Trump can make because the next 4 years, many people say this will be the government of Trump and Musk, Donald Trump. Let us see. I mean, once Trump takes over next week on 20th of January, how he perceives the policies in different part of the world, including in Africa, including in Mozambique and many other places.
Yes, sir. So the main thing is that is getting the material of these batteries for the Tesla from Mozambique. But Mozambique is still the poor country. Which kind of influence the international organization can do with the international entrepreneurs and the poor countries when they are making these contracts? Because sometimes we see that the international entrepreneurs, they are getting more much rich than where they are getting the material as a resource. How I can take the resource from Mozambique for building the Teslas, and Mozambique is still poor. The people of that area is still poor, but Tesla is doing the Elon Musk, the most richest man in the world, and the international organization is just seeing this, not do nothing. Like, okay, you are getting more rich, you are getting resources from there, and that state from Africa or anyway. But that is part of Africa, all the countries is poor, but you are getting more rich. How we can divide these uh, results to Africa also? Or yes, the main thing is this: which influence the international organization can do in this kind of the contracts when they say they saw that in this part they make in contract, but it's like not equal. So both parts, one part's getting more advantage for this, and the country is not getting. I don't know because of corruption also sometimes, but okay for the that local part responsibility of those people. Sometimes those people don't have the schools, hospitals, basic system of water. But in that area, we have most of resources. And someone is taking there from his country, building the cars and selling the cars, billions of dollars. Yes, what kind of influence the international organization can do about this? This is my first question, sir.
Right, right. I think very good perspectives. Okay, thank you, Domingo. Okay, so at least you brought a very interesting. In some ways, you know what? I think I don't know much about your country, Mozambique. Okay, but in general, I know there are many countries, developing countries. Okay, they try to move up in the economic ladders, but sometimes some rich countries they try to take advantage of that. Okay, uh, and I think if it is in black and white terms, okay, like, look, I am going to do X for you. If you can do Y, I think that is good. But if there is some hidden agenda, I think, in my opinion, I think that's not fair and that's not fair to those people. For example, I remember many years ago, I was reading an article that places like in Laos, in Cambodia, even in Thailand, the Nike had a big problem because what they used to do is they used the cheap labor in Laos, Cambodia, those countries, okay, in Vietnam, etc. Okay, and those people they prepare these Nike shoes, okay. Then so when you buy a shoes in London or some places, okay, it is said this is marketed from Los Angeles, from California, but it is made in Laos, in Cambodia. So if you hire somebody in California, you pay, let us say, $10 or $20 per hour, but you can hire somebody in Laos and Cambodia for $1 or maybe less than that. Okay, so the profit margin is 80-90%. I mean, so I don't know. I mean, what Elon Musk would like to do, if it is really helping out number of people getting jobs or things like that, at least there should be a level playing field. But sometimes this greed factors, okay, trying to exploit, trying to manipulate, I think that's not fair. Okay, so that way what happens is you will always be in that scale of below the poverty lines kind of things. Okay, so that kind of thing, even if they get, let us say, 20%, 30%, everything should be clear in black and white terms like that. But a lot of times it is not said, I mean, but we see some of this. I'm just giving you that example. But in Mozambique, I don't know, I mean, so let us see, I mean, how things play out in real terms. Okay, uh, in this particular case.
Okay, sir.
Thank you very much. Thanks for bringing this
Thank you.
perspectives. I appreciate it.
Yes. So from Syria now, we know that the regime of Assad going down. So is there new maybe new regime of rebels now? So which kind of regime is that? We call military regime, unitary
You mean
regime. Which kind?
you mean in Syria? You mean?
Yes, yes, in Syria.
Syria, I don't know. I think this is still in a very fluid state. Okay, so let us wait for a couple of weeks and months. Okay, maybe Turkey is dominating. There are some different competing elements, maybe some external actors. So let Trump take over. I think a lot of geopolitics, geoeconomics, geostrategy is going to change once Donald Trump takes over next week on 20th. So maybe in the next class, okay, maybe we can discuss that. Okay, so let Trump becomes the American president for the second time, and then we'll see how it leads to some geopolitical changes, if any, or geoeconomic changes, okay, including in Syria. Okay, so I will discuss that. Please remind me this question after 1 or 2 weeks. Okay.
Okay, sir. Thank you.
Unless there is any other questions, maybe it is a Sunday, so maybe we can all prepare for dinner. So, is
Good
it
evening,
okay?
sir.
Yes, good evening.
Yes, I like this lecture a lot, sir. It is very
Oh, thanks a lot.
insightful.
Thank you. Thank you. You are also in the morning,
Yes,
right?
sir.
The India World class. Yeah, I remember that. Yes.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Thank you.
So,
And yes.
as you have said about Africa, and then I have followed few YouTubers who are like world travelers, and then I came across like one person when he was going through different countries in Africa. I saw there was lots of difference between the countries, as in one is very rich and one is very poor,
Yes.
and then
Yes.
I came to see that the huge impact of their present times is because of the colonial rule. And then also, I have seen many Indian companies that are either motor vehicle companies or manufacturing companies that are there in those in African countries. And also, I have seen in the well-connected regions with respect to transport, most of the Chinese transportation is there,
Right.
as in like the either the metro rails or the bullet trains. So they are mostly operated by the Chinese companies, and then I saw like the loco pilots are basically Chinese there.
Yes. Yes.
So I just want to ask this question, sir. Like, is it like can we relate like the diplomacy of China is like a new colonism to countries like which are getting developed?
I mean, I will not say exactly the term neo-colonialism, but in a way, I think all the symptoms, okay? So, but I think there is a difference. Colonial people, they used to be there, okay? They used to get, but I think
Yes,
China is playing a long game, okay? So in the name of quote unquote peaceful rise, okay, under Jinping, okay, they like to have a more
yes,
kind of expand the big net of spheres of influence, okay, so that they can be a dominant power, they can be a
yes,
hegemonic power, they can go toe to toe with the United States of America. So I think in that context, so it is not necessarily exploiting the resources, etc., etc. I think so. There is a difference and distinction, but yes. Does China has a hegemonic ambition on in Africa? Yes. Do they want to have a dominance in terms of controlling the different things and expand their spheres of influence? Yes. Okay. But are they strictly in a classical sense a colonial attitude or colonial things? Probably the answer is no. Okay. But they are playing a long game, a big game. Okay. And in many ways, they're giving some very generous financial aids. Okay. And as you said, in different things, okay, but not necessarily in a colonial kind of thing, but more like, okay, to expand, to enlarge their spheres of influence.
yes, sir.
Okay,
Yes, sir. Thank you,
thank
sir.
most welcome. Thank you. Okay, I guess we can conclude this lecture today. So thank you very much, all of you. Okay, I'll see you next Sunday. Okay, I teach two courses: MPSC 1, India and the World at 12 to 2, and then the other one, this one, 7 to 9, 7 o'clock to State and Society in Africa. Okay, so again, thank you very much. Okay, thanks for being in my class. I appreciate it. Okay, and have a nice Sunday, whatever is left, and have a great Monday and weekdays starting from tomorrow. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.